Week number 8 of the NFL season is officially here, so in today's video, let's go ahead and try and predict every single game of week number 8. So as I mentioned, we are going to be trying to predict every single game of week number 8. In case you guys are wondering what my record is up to this point, my current record is 65-42. Unfortunately, this week there are no bye weeks, so we'll be talking about every single team, starting off with our Thursday night football game and ending off with Monday night football. With that said, if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button, but let's hop into it. So as I mentioned, we're going to begin with our Thursday night football game between the Minnesota Vikings and the LA Rams. The Minnesota Vikings are obviously coming off of a loss to the Detroit Lions, a game in which they actually played pretty well, all things considered, but ultimately just came up a tad bit short very late in that game. It wasn't the greatest game for the Vikings. I definitely think they've played better games this season, but I don't think that that was a game that they would typically lose, especially if they were going up against a worser opponent, and that's exactly what's going on this week. Now, the LA Rams are starting to get a bit more healthy, but at the same time, this team is still clearly not as good as they've been the past couple years. I expect Minnesota to be able to put up some really good numbers. I expect them to look clean on offense, and I expect this defense to give Matthew Stafford a ton of issues. So with that said, I'm going to pick the Minnesota Vikings to beat the LA Rams 30-21. Moving on to our noon games on Sunday, we are going to begin with the Green Bay Packers versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now in this game, it is very obvious who the favorite is going to be, and that is of course the Green Bay Packers, but could the Jacksonville Jaguars make this interesting? 1000%. Are they going to win? I seriously doubt. This Jaguars team just simply is not playing well, both offensively and especially defensively. Whereas the Green Bay Packers are starting to get their stride going. They're starting to play some really good football. And even though Jordan Love is having some really bad turnovers, he's also having some incredible play after it. So for this Packers team, I feel like the only way for them to lose this game is if Jordan Love just has a bunch of turnovers, especially like bad turnovers that lead to some defensive points. But as long as he can avoid that and just play his overall game, I think the Packers are going to win this one pretty handily. I have the final score 27-16 in favor of Green Bay. Moving on to the Miami Dolphins versus the Arizona Cardinals. Now it is expected that Tua is going to be able to play in this game, so that changes this game completely. For the Miami Dolphins, this is as close to a must-win game as there ever will be this season for this team. This team is finally somewhat healthy. They finally get their starting quarterback, and they're going up against a Cardinals team that isn't particularly great. For Arizona, I expect them to do some good things offensively, but I do expect Miami to come out there with a lot of urgency on the offensive end to put up some good numbers and ultimately win the game. I expect this one to be a tad bit of an offensive shootout, not necessarily incredibly high scoring, but some really good offense with maybe the defenses bending but not necessarily breaking a whole bunch. I expect Tua to come out there and play a little bit rusty early on, but I think by the second half he can get himself into the game and start to play better. So because of that, and because I think Tyreek Hill is going to have a really good game against this Cardinals defense, I'm going to pick the Miami Dolphins to win with a final score of 28-21. Next up, we have an AFC East clash between the New York Jets and the New England Patriots. Similar to the Miami Dolphins, this is really put up or shut up for the New York Jets. If you lose this game versus one of the worst teams in the NFL, your season is completely over. Hell, it already is almost over as it is. And because this Patriots team doesn't really have a real reason to seriously try to win this game, I do expect this Jets team to win this game. This Patriots defense, while it is good, it also hasn't been playing as good as I thought they would coming into the season, especially as of late. And because this Jets offense is moving the ball effectively, they're just making some mistakes. I do feel like in this week, going up against a bad opponent, they'll be able to fix some of those mistakes and actually execute at a somewhat high level. Barring the Jets making this a really close and competitive game late, I think they will win this game. For New England, if you're going to win this game, you have to win time of possession, you have to win the turnover battle, and you have to make the New York Jets make mistakes. And while that is definitely a possibility, I'm going to assume that the Jets don't do that, so I'm going to pick the Jets to win with a final score of 24-17. Moving on, we have an AFC North clash between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cleveland Browns. I don't feel like I have to spend too much time on this one because we all know who is likely going to win. Now, all time, Lamar Jackson is, I think, 7-4 versus this Cleveland Browns team, and he hasn't particularly been very dominant against these Browns teams, but what I will say is I think those past Browns teams are clearly better than the current Browns team that we know right now. I do expect Jameis Winston to help improve this offense and make this team a bit more competitive, but I also expect expect there to be plenty of opportunities for the Baltimore Ravens to take advantage of missed opportunities that the Browns don't take advantage of. I expect this Browns offense to start a little bit slow, but I also do expect them to execute a lot better than when they had Deshaun Watson. That being said, I still don't think they're going to put up a ton of points, but I think they'll play better. For me, this game really comes down to which defense forces more turnovers and which defense just simply plays better. Baltimore's defense hasn't been playing particularly great, but their offense has been ridiculously good, and that's kind of the same thing for the Browns, except the offense has been horrendous. This Browns defense hasn't been bad, but they also haven't been great, but I think in large part that's because of how bad the offense has been. And because I expect the offense to be better for Cleveland, I don't expect this one to get into a crazy blowout because I expect this Browns defense to play better. But with that said, the combination of Lamar and Derrick Henry is just going to be such a hard issue for this Browns team to overcome. So because of that, I am going to pick the Ravens to win 24-13. Moving on, we have a very interesting game between two teams that I would say have disappointed so far this season, and that is the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Cincinnati Bengals. For Philadelphia, their offensive execution has just been really bad. Saquon Barkley has been great. Jalen Hurts has had some good moments, but has also not played particularly good this season. But this is a team that is getting healthier, and they are also going up against a Bengals team that is also dealing with their fair share of issues as well. For the Bengals, Joe Burrow is playing some really good football, and this offense is putting up a bunch of numbers, but the defense also has some issues. So in this game, I do expect this one to be a very high-scoring game. I expect both offenses to be able to move the ball down the field and just force a ton of issues on these defenses. And I think defensively, it's really going to come down to which defense breaks the most, which defense can bend but not necessarily break versus which one will ultimately break. And because I just have a tad bit more faith in this Bengals defense, and I also have more faith in that Bengals offense, I do think the Bengals have a bit of an upper hand here. Right now, as of when I'm making this video, of course things could change a few weeks from now, but I would say that Joe Burrow is clearly playing better than Jalen Hurts. In fact, Jalen Hurts isn't really passing the ball a crap ton like he used to. In the past week against the Giants, he barely threw the ball, I think like maybe 19 times total, which obviously that benefits this Eagles offense because Hurts is a really good weapon and you have a really good offensive line that can block for a guy like Saquon and Jalen Hurts. But against this Bengals team, I just kind of feel like you're going to have to pass the ball and make some explosive plays happen, because I do think this Bengals offense is going to come out there with some determination, with some urgency, and put up enough numbers. And I just don't know if this Eagles offense is going to be able to find those explosives as much as Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase can. With that said, of course, AJ Brown could go for a long touchdown and Saquon could break off a big run. I just kind of have that gut feeling that Cincinnati will find those explosive plays a bit easier than this Eagles offense. So because of that, I am going to pick the Cincinnati Bengals 31-26. Next up, we have an AFC South showdown between the Indianapolis Colts and the Houston Texans. Now the Houston Texans are coming off a bit of a bad loss where their offense didn't look as good, primarily in the passing game. CJ Stroud definitely is going to want to bounce back from that most recent performance. And fortunately for him, he's going up against a team that he's had some pretty solid success against in the Indianapolis Colts. Now, for the Indianapolis Colts, this offense just simply has not been able to play consistently well. Richardson will go out there and make several good plays, and then he'll have a fumble, or he'll throw an interception, or he'll just throw a horrendous pass that should be a touchdown. And that's kind of the issue for this Colts team. They're really just struggling with consistency. Whereas for this Texans team, it's kind of just been weird to start the year off. They're obviously playing well in certain spots, but they've also had a couple just really bad moments. They haven't really been able to find that offensive groove that they found throughout last year, and I think maybe that comes with some of the growing pains they're going through. With that said, as I mentioned a bit earlier, Houston has had some success against this Colts team, and I think it will likely continue to trend in this direction as well. I don't expect a blowout. I expect a very highly competitive game, and honestly, if the Indianapolis Colts were to win this game, this would be a massive game for them. I just don't know if they're going to be able to do it because I think CJ Stroud is going to have a big bounce back performance. So because of that, I am going to go ahead and pick the Houston Texans with a final score of 26-22. Next up, we have a fun game in terms of these two teams don't play very often, and that is the Tennessee Titans versus the Detroit Lions. With that said, I don't think this game's going to be particularly close. I expect Will Levis to be the starting quarterback for the Tennessee Titans, and yeah, that's not very good. I like Will Levis. I think he is a quality quarterback, but the issue is he's not playing like a quality quarterback. Recently, he has just been outright terrible, and it feels like this Titans team is starting to lose a lot of faith in him. It's gotten so bad that in their most recent performance with Will Levis, they weren't really taking too many shots deep. And now recently, they just traded off DeAndre Hopkins to the Chiefs, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. So it's going to force guys like Calvin Ridley to play an even higher role, and honestly, I just don't know if he's up for the task, especially when you're going up against a Lions team that is playing some of their best football in recent memory. The Lions are coming off a massive victory versus the Minnesota Vikings. They've also had a couple other big wins against teams like the Dallas Cowboys and many others. And barring this Lions team just completely losing sight of their ultimate task here of getting a win each week, then I don't really think there's a real route here for the Titans to win this game. Yes, sure, Will Levis could potentially have a good game where he plays very well, but going up against this Lions defense and seeing what I've seen, I don't think this game's going to be particularly close. I have a Lions blowout here, 34-10. Next up, we have a rematch of a game that was played just a few weeks ago, and it was an incredible game between the Atlanta Falcons and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, unfortunately, the Buccaneers are coming into this game very shorthanded. They're likely going to be without both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and that is really bad news for this Buccaneers offense. I think for this Buccaneers offense, you're really going to have to rely on the run game, rely on guys like Rachaad White. And I also think in this game, guys like Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving, if they are ready to go, I would expect their roles to increase mightily because of the absences in the receiving core. I'm going to assume this Buccaneers offense is going to do a whole bunch of screen work. I expect a lot of running the football, and I expect not a ton of just simply drop back passes where Baker Mayfield is going to have to find his receivers. So for Atlanta, as long as you can cover the tight end, cover those screens, and effectively stuff the run, I just don't know where this Buccaneers offense is going to find the ability to move the ball down the field, primarily in the passing game. Whereas for this Falcons team, they're coming off a bad loss to the Seattle Seahawks, and they obviously have shown that they can have some success against this Buccaneers defense, and I feel like they're going to be able to find that success once again. Now, no, I don't expect Kirk Cousins to go for 500 yards like he did last time, but I expect him to have a pretty solid game, maybe potentially 250 plus yards and multiple touchdowns. And I just don't know if this Buccaneers offense is going to be able to match them like they were able to do somewhat last time. So with that said, because I think this Falcons defense will be able to stop Baker Mayfield from getting to the tight end and getting those easy checkdowns and whatnot, I'm going to have the Falcons winning 31-20. Next up, we have the New Orleans Saints versus the LA Chargers. Now, as of right now, I don't think we know who the Saints starting quarterback is going to be. Now, from what I've heard as of a report 2 days ago, if Derek Carr is not good to go, Spencer Rattler will be the starting quarterback. So I'm going to make the assumption that Derek Carr won't be able to play and that they will go with Spencer Rattler. Of course, if Derek Carr does play, that completely changes my point of view of this game, and I would probably lean towards a Saints victory. So just keep that in mind when I do make this pick. But because I expect Spencer Rattler to go out there and play, I don't really think that they have a chance in this one. Simply put, this Chargers offense hasn't been great, but their defense has been spectacular to start the year off. They're ranking very highly in multiple different categories: opponents' points per game, opponents' yards per game, opponents' touchdowns per game, so on and so forth. And going up against a Saints offense that doesn't have their starting quarterback and has a bunch of injuries on the offensive line and in the receiving core, I just really don't know how the Saints team is going to be able to effectively move the ball. And if this Saints team has like any sort of turnovers, then it's going to be even worse for them. Now, with that said, I expect this Saints defense, even though they are depleted, I expect them to be able to play well against this Chargers offense, because quite frankly, this Chargers offense just hasn't been playing that well this year. So because of that, I expect a very low scoring game, but I also do expect the Chargers to, for the most part, have control throughout the game. I think the Saints will put together a couple drives, but I don't expect them to put up a bunch of points. I expect some long field goals. I expect some fourth down conversions that they're going to go for. I expect the Saints team to be aggressive, but I just don't know how effective they're going to be in their aggression. So with that being said, I'm going to pick the LA Chargers to win a very defensive battle, 17-9. Moving on to the Buffalo Bills versus the Seattle Seahawks. This is going to be a very fun game and also a very important game for both these teams. For Buffalo, there's really no concern about losing their division. That's really not the concern here. The concern for Buffalo is that you want to have a good victory against a quality team. Yes, they've had some good wins so far this year, but they haven't really gone up against a good team and dominated them. And this is a really good opportunity to do so against a Seahawks team that is looking somewhat good. The Seahawks are coming off a very impressive victory versus the Atlanta Falcons. So for the Buffalo Bills, you're going up against a Seahawks team that has some confidence right now. And with the Buffalo Bills having another week to adapt Amari Cooper for this offense, I do expect this offense to go out there and play some really good football, especially if they can get Amari Cooper going early in this game. And for the Seattle Seahawks side of things, listen, this Seahawks team hasn't had a premier win in a long time. Hell, I think their best victory is last week versus the Atlanta Falcons, at least in the past couple years. Yes, I know you beat the Eagles last year with Drew Lock, but the Eagles weren't the Eagles, if you get my drift. So for the Seahawks team, this is an awesome opportunity to not only further your lead in the division, but to also get a very good victory against a good Bills team. But with that said, I just don't really feel like that's going to happen. There's some injury concerns with DK Metcalf. And yes, they'll likely be able to run the football, and I think they'll be able to move the ball offensively. I just don't know if this Bills defense is going to break, because I expect this offense for the Bills to be able to play very well, and I expect the defense for the Bills to also play very well. So with that said, I am going to pick the Bills to win this one, just simply because the Seattle Seahawks just can never seem to win these big-time matchups, and I've seen Buffalo take care of business multiple times in the past couple years, so I'm going to pick the Bills to win 27-18. Next up, we have the Chicago Bears versus the Washington Commanders. Now, similar to another game we talked about earlier, the quarterback position right now for Washington is a very big question mark, at least for this week. Obviously, Jaden Daniels is dealing with a rib injury, so I'm going to give you guys two predictions on this one. I'll give you guys the prediction of what I think the game will look like if Jaden Daniels does play and if he's 100%. And then I'll give you guys the score if Jaden Daniels doesn't play and they have to roll with Marcus Mariota. So if Jaden Daniels does play, obviously we're going to be able to see the matchup between Caleb and Jaden Daniels. Caleb has been playing some really good football against some really bad teams, and Jaden Daniels has also been playing some really good football against good and bad teams. If Jaden Daniels is able to play, I expect him to continue his dominant season, even if he is going up against a great Bears defense. So if Jaden does play, I'm going to pick the Commanders to win 31-28. But if Marcus Mariota is the starting quarterback next week, then I do think that really does heavily favor the Chicago Bears. I expect Caleb Williams to play well against this Commanders defense that I wouldn't necessarily say is all that good. And sure, he might have a couple bad rookie moments. Maybe he'll have an interception or a fumble that could potentially give some points to this Commanders defense. I feel like as long as he plays clean and gets the ball out to his playmakers, he should be able to put up some really solid numbers this week. Because that Bears defense is just really dominant and really stout, I feel like they'll be able to do enough good things against this really good Commanders offense. Mariota is a good quarterback. He is definitely a veteran. He knows how to see the football well, and I think he will be able to put up some points, but I wouldn't imagine that they're going to be particularly close if Mariota is playing. With that said, I'm going to pick the Bears with going up against Marcus Mariota 28-24. I think maybe they could put up like a late field goal to make this thing a little bit closer. Moving on to an AFC West matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Las Vegas Raiders. So I'm just going to keep this one very simple and very just quickly put. The Kansas City Chiefs are undefeated, and even if Patrick Mahomes plays good or bad, this team is still going to win. This Raiders team has no business winning this game. They don't have a good quarterback. Their defense has been horrible this year, and their offense is also just as bad. Now, what will be interesting to see is if they can get DeAndre Hopkins suited up for this week against the Raiders. If that's the case, that adds just another element to this offense. And of course, we can't forget what they said in the offseason. That's definitely going to have this Kansas City Chiefs team extremely motivated for this game. So simply put, the Chiefs will win, and I think they're going to blow them out because they were embarrassed last year versus the Raiders, and the Raiders were talking shit all offseason. So yeah, I'm going to go 34-6 in favor of Kansas City. Then our last 3 o'clock game is between the Carolina Panthers and the Denver Broncos. Carolina is going back to Bryce Young, which I am excited for, but I'm also a little bit nervous. Because quite frankly, I am rooting for Bryce Young. I really hope he has a really good game, but so far this year, I haven't seen him be able to be a competent quarterback in the league. When you're going up against the Broncos defense that has got some dudes who can really play, that really doesn't favor Bryce Young. I hope Bryce goes out there and drops 4 touchdowns and 400 yards and has his, welcome to the NFL moment where he just shines super bright, but I don't think that's going to happen. I expect Bo Nix to have a really solid game versus a bad Carolina Panthers defense. Do I think it's going to be a huge blowout? No, but I expect this one to be firmly in control for the Denver Broncos throughout the game. For Denver, what I really want to see is Bo Nix look comfortable in the pocket. I want to see him make some nice high-level throws. I want to see Bo Nix have one of his better games of the season against a bad Panthers defense. For Carolina, listen, I just want to see Bryce Young play good. That's all I want to see. With that said, I'm going to pick Denver to win 21-12. And then we have our Sunday night football game between the Dallas Cowboys and the San Francisco 49ers. I think this one is very easy. Let's not overcomplicate this. The Niners, simply put, even with all their issues, are a better football team than what the Dallas Cowboys are going to look like on Sunday. Dallas has too many injuries. Even if Micah does play, they're still going to be missing a ton of guys. Now, I will say if Dallas can get Micah Parsons and DaRon Bland to play this week, that makes this game a little bit more interesting, but I still feel like I'm heavily favoring the Niners here. Yes, the Niners are going to be without probably maybe even Debo and Ayuk and of course Christian McCaffrey, but to be honest with you, I don't care. I think with guys like Jordan Mason, George Kittle, Jawan Jennings, and all those guys, I think they'll still look really good. And also, I wouldn't be shocked if Ricky Pearsall gets some legitimate run here and maybe gets a couple catches. This Dallas team, just simply put, is not very good. All this Niners defense has to do is double team and shut out CeeDee Lamb, and you're going to dominate that Cowboys team because their offensive line isn't good, they don't have a run game, and they don't have a second weapon next to CD. So as long as you double team CD, make them go to somebody else, you're gonna win the defensive side of the ball. And for Brock Purdy, just don't turn the ball over, don't make big mistakes, and you'll be fine. For this Cowboys team, if you want to win this game, you have to run the ball, you have to effectively get the ball to CD, and you gotta play some good defense. And frankly, I don't think they can do any of those right now. So because of that, I'm gonna stick with the trend of the Niners dominating the Dallas Cowboys. I have the final score 31-12. And to end this video off, we have our Monday Night Football game between the Pittsburgh Steelers, led by Russell Wilson, going up against the New York Giants. Now for the Giants, I don't know if it's going to be Drew Lock or Daniel Jones, but I honestly don't think that changes my answer all that much regardless of who it is. Because from what I've seen from both these teams is I'm seeing a Steelers team that is playing some really good, confident football where they're playing a complementary style of offense where they can run the football effectively with Najee and all those other guys and pass the ball effectively now with Russell Wilson. Whereas for this Giants team, they don't have a run game. Their offensive line is a little bit shaky, though it's definitely better than last year. And really the only consistent weapon you have offensively is Malik Neighbors, and he's a rookie. And then you look on the defensive side of the ball for the Giants, and yes, you have some dudes who can play, but I don't know if that's a complete defense quite yet. So for the Steelers team, what I really want to see is I want to see a continuation of what I saw versus that New York Jets defense. I want to see this offense run the ball effectively. I want to see them play with a lot of spirit, a lot of heart, and a lot of determination. And I want to see a put together effort to beat up on this Giants team. This is a game where the Steelers should flex their muscle and should flex their overall talent gap over a team like the New York Giants. What I don't want to see from the Steelers team is a close and competitive matchup that goes deep into the fourth quarter. I want to see the Steelers team dominate and beat up on this Giants team throughout the entire game. For the Giants, I think you want to make this game ugly. I think you want to force Russell Wilson to make some tough throws. I think you want to lead him into some interceptions, lead him out of the pocket, make him uncomfortable, and maybe give yourself a chance late. But as I mentioned, I think the Steelers team is going to be able to play well. Just don't get into an ugly game, look good against a bad team, and that's all I can ask for. I'm going to pick the Steelers to win 29-17. So with that all said, here is my official list of my picks here. Not a ton of upsets this week because I feel like right now teams are starting to separate from one another and starting to play some really consistent football. So I don't have a ton of upsets, but I do have a few kind of littered in there. And if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button because that would mean a lot for me. And I love you guys. Peace.